How long do I think DBD is gonna last? Excellent tuber question. I think it's already starting to see a decent decline in terms of like, hold on one second. No, I almost had that. When I say DBD has already started to see a decent decline, I don't necessarily mean in like player count or in like popularity. But one thing that's definitely been on the downtrend kind of year after year since I want to say maybe like 2020, 2021, definitely the past 2 years, is the hype over new stuff in the game dies out super quick. And I know a lot of people can relate. It feels like, oh my god, a new chapter's coming out. Oh my god, they're collabing, you know, with this, they're getting a license for this. And, you know, first couple weeks before it comes out is like, oh my god, it comes out. Average viewership on Twitch goes from like sub 30K to sometimes like 100,000. And then like 2 days later, massive drop off. It feels like new content in this game doesn't retain enough hype. I think that's because people soon realize that like at the end of the day, the core part of the game and the core issues are always ever present, even with new content. Which is unfortunate, because if like every new chapter brought forth, say, a new meta of perks, like massive changes to perks or like quality improvements to the game or game engine, I think the hype would last a little bit longer, and like just the overall like strength of the player base would remain like more sturdy. But I think people soon realize like, oh, new content is just like, I mean, it's just new content. The base game doesn't change. And after you get past like the first few days of, oh, yeah, I'm playing the new killer like 90% of my games, then it's like, oh, I never even see the new killer because they're not strong enough or because they've been nerfed or what have you. So I guess to answer your question, I don't know, maybe... This sucks, I need to go trade. This is like the worst spot to get a double hook. Look at these hooks. Like one of the things... Like, this is a very, very, very hyper-specific point, but one of the things that really sucks and isn't fun are hooks that spawn on top of each other. DBD used to have, like, a maximum distance, it felt like, between hooks, so you couldn't get hooks on top of each other. Now, if the killer gets lucky and they get a couple hooks next to one another, it just creates almost the feeling of, like, an unwinnable situation. Feelings like that, moments like that, where it just doesn't feel good. I think DBD nowadays, like, current DBD, has too many of those this doesn't feel good moments. Well, maybe another, I don't know. Like trying to put like an expiration date on this game is kind of like a bad way to. I think I feel like it's been a slow decline, slow progressive decline in the good feeling of DBD and people's like the rapport that behavior I felt had built up with its player base has tanked. I don't think there's a whole lot of rapport left. I feel like it's mostly just like hype. And hype is never a long-lasting, solid way to like retain a, you know, a loyal customer player base. If I had to put a hard line expiration, watch the game as it approaches their 10-year anniversary in a couple years or whatever. And then we might be able to have a real good Oh shit, I didn't know you had a plot twist. I thought you actually went down. I'm so sorry. That's why you didn't want me to heal you. What do I enjoy about DBD? I like going for saves, flashlight, flashbang, or otherwise. And I just like trying to outplay the killer. The thing that I've always enjoyed about this game is that in the 1v1 scenario, when it's you versus the killer, they're chasing you, your teammates are doing gens, the killer isn't leaving you immediately. I like the fact that the survivor is technically at a disadvantage. They're slower. Like, obviously, yeah, you can have some perks and, like, pallets and windows, but eventually the killer is supposed to catch you. Like, they will catch you eventually, right? If given infinite time. So, they have the slight advantage on you in the 1v1. And I like using that fact to have a really good feeling. See, that was just a terrible fast vault. I like that fact because it always feels like if I get the killer to leave me and chase, if I have a really good 2-3 gen chase, 4 gen chase, it feels like I won. Regardless if I die or if I live, if we do all the gens or not, moments like that feel like an accomplishment because technically the odds were stacked against me. And like a lot of that is the other part of DBD that I like, which are the mind games, you know? The window text, like running through the killer, using line of sight manipulation to make them guess wrong. Little things like that. A lot of the 1v1 can be mental gymnastics. You versus the killer. And that's kind of part of my issue. That's part of why, like, for me, I would say specifically in the past, like, 6 months, this game has just gotten a lot less fun. Because they have been and are progressively slowly taking away things that make Survivor interesting. Like, in the past 6 months or so. Like, the nerf to flashbangs, they removed locker saves with flashlights. They started making every map smaller, palettes less safe in general. A lot of killers coming out that are anti-loop killers where you don't have a whole lot of interaction with them during the chase. Meaning, like, pallets don't really hold as much value. Like, the whole interaction isn't really, like, looping stuff tight and trying to get a mind game and, you know, like, say, greed the pallet. A lot of the interaction and outplay, if you want to call it interaction, is like, okay, when are they going to use their power? Are they going to hit it? And there's not much I can do about it if they do because their power charges up instantly. So a lot of elements of the chase, as well as now some elements of, like, saving other survivors has just been nerfed to oblivion. It's definitely a more hyper-competitive game than it used to be. This game's got more disliked the longer it's been around, but it's objectively improved, just not as fast as it should have. Improved is a... Yes and no. Improved is a weird word, right? If you're talking from a competitive standpoint, in terms of just purely escaping versus the killer's ability to get multiple kills, yes, it is improved. In terms of, like, maps standing out that are completely busted for Survivor or, like, more equal, yes, it has improved. Nerfing perks that were super, super strong and didn't really provide much outplay, yeah, the game's improved a little bit. However, I think the reason that a lot of people fell in love with DBD to begin with wasn't for its balanced competitive persona, because it never existed. It was more so, hey, here's something different, you know, as compared to, like, as opposed to, like, a shooter or an MMO. Like, here's, like, a survival game that's asymmetrical, and it has, you know, some of horror's, like, most interesting characters in it. That was the uniqueness of the game. The fact that it was not super balanced, and, like, a lot of people make this case. They're like, oh, so you just like DBD when it was more broken. Well, it's kind of what it symbolized. When DBD wasn't as balanced and was more silly, people didn't take it as serious. Like, sometimes the best games are ones where they aren't taken too seriously by necessarily the devs or the players, but they're still fun because of stuff in the game, which is what DBD was. You know, it's like, for instance, like, what's a really good fun game that people like simulator games, right? Like Supermarket Sim, Stardew Valley, which is a farming sim. People really love those games. They don't take themselves too seriously. They aren't built on, like, a competitive backbone. They were just like a passion project put out by a company or a small group of people that had, like, this vision, and they did it, and people loved it. And there were certain elements that kept people coming back, along with, like, regular updates. And that's what DBD was. And what I think what a lot of games do regardless is when they get to be a certain level of popular, they almost always kind of gravitate towards this, like, hyper serious, hyper competitive landscape. Because, like, for most developers, that's, like, in their mind naturally the next progression is, okay, how do we make it bigger and better, more appealing? How do we make more money out of it? What sort of microtransactions can we put in? How can we expand upon what we have? And then obviously as you draw in a bigger and bigger crowd year after year, you're going to get more serious gamers, more critiqueful gamers, more competitive gamers. So then conversations will always start to shape themselves around, oh, like, DBD isn't balanced. How can we make this more balanced? How can we make this more competitive? And I think DBD for the most part, is kind of reaching its peak of that, where a lot of veteran players for a long time have been saying, God, I miss old DBD. I wish when it wasn't as competitive, as serious. I wish when it was a little bit more silly. Even though it wasn't necessarily the most balanced. And as I said before, like the hype over updates and stuff is just dying out sooner and sooner. I don't know if anyone cared to listen to any of that, but namaste. There's also something to be said, like you can weave in the idea of a monopoly and how, because of all the licensed content this game has had, it's kind of had a monopoly on this genre of game, which is why every other game that comes out like this dies typically within a few months.